Triumph is a company that started in April of 2021. Started out as a scrap metal brokerage company, and we also launched a trucking company called Triumph Express. Today, Triumph Express is 9 semi trucks, 13 dump trailers with a small fleet of roll off boxes. And the brokerage business is buying and selling scrap here domestically in the United States. We don't do any exporting. We buy from the dealer or demolition companies, and we sell direct to the mills or the foundries.
That's cool. So it's all within U.S.
Yes.
I like the idea that you don't.
Midwest, Southeast, regions of the United States is kind of our primary focus. I'd say more so right now in the Midwest, but eventually like to try to expand, more west, like west of Illinois and out that way. But right now we're small but mighty.
Nice.
So I'll add to this, and Ryan, what I appreciate about you is you're a businessman through and through. Everybody we know kind of says whether or not you were a youngster growing up or today, this is also not your first rodeo in the industry. What got you into scrap metal, and what do you like in terms of being able to apply the business dynamic to maybe not your most traditional business market or business sector throughout the United States?
Well, I feel like the scrap metal industry kind of has a lot of diversity. It's not, black and white by any stretch. Every day there's something new in our industry. So I feel like I'm always learning and more encouraged to want to continue to make progressions in the day to day what we're doing, whether it's through purchasing assets or customizing type of assets that would cater to our business on the trucking side with the type of dump trailers and the size or the length. Commodities as far as negotiating premiums and volumes. I mean, there's everything's changing. The commodity industry is very volatile. It's up and down, roller coaster ride pretty frequently in these days. It just makes it interesting. There's a lot of it's a small industry where everybody kind of knows everybody. So it's kind of like a gentleman's club where everybody kind of needs each other, but then they compete each other in some way. So it makes it fun. It reminds me a lot of like sports and hanging out in the locker room with the boys and having good conversations and figuring out business ideas and expanding from there.
Yeah. So Ryan, how did you even get into this? Like, I wouldn't think scrap metal is not the sexiest industry to get into. So what made you think, oh, there's a lot of opportunity there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I met a guy when I was in sales with a company called Costco Wholesale before I got in the scrap business, and I was selling executive memberships throughout Ohio. And this one gentleman walked in and was looking at one of the plasma TVs, and plasmas were real big and popular when they first came out. And the Browns and Steelers were playing. I asked this gentleman, I said, "Who are you rooting for?" He says, "The Browns." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, take the TV home. If they have a shitty season, bring it back. I'll give you a full refund cash back. Just ask for me." And he says, "What are you in sales?" I said, "Something like that." And he hands me his scrap metal business card. And I said, "What is this, a screw off card? Am I bothering you?" He says, "No, I'm looking for young guys to get some coverage for me." I said, "No kidding." I said, what do I do? Go around garbage cans and and garages, pick up Coke cans and refrigerators for a living?" And he said, "Yeah, something like that."
Just that's how I envisioned this industry. That's my ignorance. But,
well, I couldn't take this guy serious. So he says, "Yeah, come on out." So I did, and came out to see him. He took me to my first scrapyard, which was in Akron, Ohio, a company called Anaco. And there was this gentleman by the name of Jerry, and what was his name now? I can't think of his name now. Last name was Shorts, but really nice guy. Kind of looked like an angry Jewish Santa Claus. He came out, had this filthy, dirty golf cart, and I'm wearing a navy blue suit. And I started dusting the seat off. And he looked at me and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I don't want to screw up my suit." He says, "Well, sit down." He says, "Welcome to the scrap business." I said, "No kidding." So he said, "I'm going to drive you around my scrap yard. I'm going to tell you all the names of these different commodities. And if you don't remember what I'm telling you, I'm gonna yell at you." So I said, "Okay." So we went driving around the yard, and he was telling me the value of all of these piles of scrap, and I'm looking around, and I'm just like, man, there's no young people in this business, and and something I never heard of growing up. So it kind of had like that sort of locker room gentleman's sort of club that I kind of grew up with in sports, and saw a lot of value if I were to put my time, into this business. So shortly after that meeting, the guy that brought me in the business took me to a steel mill in Youngstown, Ohio. I got to see the steel making process and, what it was like to be on that side of the industry and what goes into it. And I was very impressed. And so I think at that point I was sold, and I asked the guy, I said, well, now what? What do you want me to do? He says, well, you're going to be buying from guys like Anico and figuring out the freight and trading it, hedging markets, and plugging these positions with the steel mills. And I said, okay, sign me up. Let's go.
So you didn't feel overwhelmed at the moment of like, wait, this feels like I'm drinking from a fire hose.
At first, I did. So within probably the first 3 months of being hired with this scrap company that brought me into the business to give me the experience I had, I literally thought they were going to probably let me go within the first 3 months because it wasn't really registering with me with, freight rates and converting, net ton and metric tons to gross ton, and then figuring
Not a
out how
big
to
numbers guy, huh?
how to buy and sell and hedge and put these programs together and make sense of everything because there's so many moving pieces. And I kept calling on this one company called Cohn Brothers down in Cincinnati or Middletown, Ohio. And there was a gentleman by the name of Don Zulanch, and I kept bugging Don over and over and over to sell me some bundles. And I think it was in my third month, right at the tail end where I was getting ready to, probably decide whether I'm going to leave or I'm going to get let go, that Don called me and said, Ryan, I'm going to give you 500 tons of these bundles to sell into Cleveland for you to stop calling me. So I said, okay, Don, sign me up. Let's go. As soon as I got him on the books, I ran around the hallway to my old boss and I said, I got Cohen Brothers on the books, and he gave me the biggest hug, and everything kind of clicked from there. And
That's
I think my
awesome.
future in scrap was meant to be.
So it's interesting. One, it sounds like, so that was your kind of entry into the good old boys club of the scrap industry, if you will.
Yeah, it kind of earned my respect. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. And so you're in your stripes, if you will, but I can't even fathom or begin to imagine the types of encounters you've had along the way, trying to source out kind of new opportunities for scrap. Do you have any crazy stories of people you've encountered or situations you found yourself in ultimately to get a deal?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of interesting, characters in this business. I mean, obviously driving to a scrapyard, you're going into areas that are, probably not the safest areas in town to be traveling into.
An upset of Ritz.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're in downtown Chicago or Dallas or wherever, there's always going to be some, an oddball area that you're not accustomed to, and you got to really
Well,
watch
this is
out.
a good question, but why is there more scrap metal in like downtown? Is that just because of like?
It has a lot to do with probably just zoning. A lot of everybody it's funny, everybody in our world wants to go green, but nobody wants to have a scrapyard in their town, which
Oh, really? Because
yeah
it's just
could well they front it because they don't like the noise, they don't like what all goes into recycling.
that's funny.
And
Yeah.
recycling
Also
is
a
the key
byproduct.
component to being environmentally friendly. And unfortunately, the sites are not the prettiest of sites. And so you're going to have a lot of people complaining about that, which makes it very difficult. So you tend to go to areas where it's not as desirable to live. And that's where you'll see a lot of scrap yards because, they have
Got it.
they don't have a lot of people complaining about it. So
Yeah, that's funny though because I do feel like you kind of catch people in like, oh, we have to go green, but then it's like, oh, but it's not
Right.
aesthetically pleasing.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and there's always an excuse. There's always something or somebody in the locker room that's going to complain or do something, and
Yeah.
it messes it up and costs those recycling companies a lot of money to build a wall or to do this or to put a
Yeah.
water, whatever it is that goes into their yard to please the city and the community. So.
Okay, so you're downtown, and
Mhm.
what happens?
Well, if you're sitting in your car and some random stranger decides to come up to your window and flash his weapon at you, and that's an uncomfortable position to be in, especially if you're from out of town, don't know the area. So,
Yeah.
scrap yards, we call the public traffic peddler business. And you get a mix of people. I mean, you're going to have of walks of all life, and there might be people that, that are kind of down on their luck or struggling for money or potentially on drugs that aren't thinking clearly, that'll go in there to for the
Yeah.
money and a quick fix. So sometimes you run into those situations with people that aren't thinking clearly, that might want to threaten your life or scare you for you to cough up some money. Or so I've had some situations like that before. I've seen the owners of scrap yards run out of their office with shotguns after with people
Oh,
breaking and
wow.
entering into their property, stealing metal to chase them off the property. I've seen a lot of that. I mean, there's been several encounters. I mean, it's a big cash business, so there's a lot of interesting behavior with how people might conduct business as well that I've seen, and I won't mention names, but yeah, it's interesting to see how this thing works on the day to
Yeah.
day. But I think a lot of things are getting a lot more regulated federally and by the state. So there's a lot more checks and balances that kind of keeps everything in line. And a lot of these operations are becoming more state of the art. They're investing a lot of concrete, a lot of modern technology. So it's starting to look more pleasing to the eye, as
Yeah.
time evolves. So.
And that was
Yeah.
gonna be my next question. Like, where do you
Mm.
see the industry heading in the next 5 years? And what are you doing right now with Triumph to get ahead of it or ultimately prepare for whatever those transitions may be?
So there's been a considerable amount of consolidation in our industry. The steel mills, such as the Cleveland Cliffs, SDI, Nucor Steel, they're all vertically integrating, and they're having to do that to be able to control tons so that they can control markets. Because at the end of the day, the mills need to make as much margin as they possibly can, and one great way to do that is to control the scrap prices from going up too much, or that would maybe erode their margin. But I do see I do
Sorry,
see
what kind
more.
of margins are we talking about, Hef? Yeah, just off the
I think the steel mills are probably making anywhere from $350 to $600 a ton margin
Oh my god.
on the new steel sales. So yeah,
Wow.
you're processing how many tons, on a annually or daily basis, whatever metric you use.
I mean, are you asking me how many tons I sell?
Well, yeah, from a mill kind of transfer over to you, what kind of tonnage are you seeing?
My business right now, being a small boutique brokerage, we probably manage, a few thousand tons a month of just pure trading, ground feeding, if you will.
Mhm.
We are a startup company, so I didn't walk into this thing with a massive line of credit. I came into this with a budget and hope that I can
Yeah.
turn the jets on here for the first 3 to 5 years and show these banks what I'm capable of doing, the revenue I'm willing to put, that I'm capable of putting up. So, my goal is to be, a 10 to $20 million a year company here within the next few years. We're almost to 10 million on the trading side. So, the future does look good there. But to answer your question specifically, I do see more consolidation. Where more scrap companies are going to end up being sold out to the big conglomerates. Which might make it more challenging for me. So that's kind of where my thought process was with the trucking company, was to become more of a hybrid service-based company with, that touch of brokerage that, can trade and have different type of fundamentals than my competition will.
Are you
So
technically in the recycling business?
yes, predominantly 100%. I mean, our hauling company does only haul scrap metal, and my brokerage business only trades scrap metal.
So do you get I know like the green bill and different things like that, does that affect your industry? Like, do you get government funds out of that or like breaks or anything like that? Not
Well,
really.
no, I don't. I mean, the whole COVID thing, I think, gave everybody, support during COVID. But
Yeah.
I started the company after COVID happened, so I didn't get any of those benefits. If I were to open up a scrap recycling yard, a processing yard, then,
Mhm.
yeah, that might be different. I might be able to qualify for certain grants. But right now, we don't currently have a processing yard. I did
Yeah.
recently open up a facility, a trucking terminal that could maybe turn into a processing yard down the road. And that's in Orville, Ohio, off of Highway 30 between Worcester and Canton, Ohio.
Nice.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, you're certainly diversifying, right, to kind of give yourself a competitive advantage. It's funny when you say boutique and
I know.
the numbers you drop behind it just give you perspective of it may be somewhat of a niche industry where there might not be a big public awareness, but
Mhm.
it's very large in terms of the numbers behind it, and that's what makes it sexy. The
Yeah, right.
numbers. Um, but I want to switch gears, and we can kind of dive in as deep as you want or stay surface level. But this is not your first time doing this. This is your second time. And some people going back, they've gone through the cycle once, especially in the same industry, if you will, and say, I've been there, I've done that, I'm burnt out, never doing it again. I know you had a partner the first time around too, where you don't this time. But But why do it again? And kind of where's your fire there and the fuel to keep you going forward?
So yeah, that's a great question. I started a company called Cobra Trading back in 2009. Started from scratch. I had two investors that stood behind me with a line of credit, which I was very grateful for, which allowed me to kind of catapult that business into almost a $50 million a year company within my first 5 years. I was managing 10 to 15,000 tons a month. I had great positions into a lot of mills. Eventually, things led to me hiring, staff and assets such as rail cars and trucks and trailers, to eventually having a scrapyard in that company. In 2020, it's kind of a little morbid, but it's all good. But I lost my daughter in 2020, which was a tough situation for my wife and I. It also took a toll on the business because I had to take a leave of absence for about 45 days. And, unfortunately, with COVID and just, all the things that were going on in everybody's lives, it made it pretty challenging for me to stay in a partnership with a company that I built, from my sweat. And, it was bittersweet, but it was the right decision. And, my wife and I, in our minds, and we decided to, for me to walk away, sell my shares, and start over.
Wow.
So Triumph has a lot to do with that story. The wings on the lion are my daughter's wings. The lion kind of represents strength and God to me, and the word triumph is something that resonates, deep in me, on a competitive level.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think when you talk to entrepreneurs, you don't realize how intertwined until you start talking to them, their personal and their business lives are. It's not just if you worked at a corporate job and something happened, you have a benefit usually or something that you can leave and then come back. And it doesn't really matter. You just,
Right.
where if you're the one, you're the entrepreneur, you are the guy, it's all connected.
Right. It is a nice feeling to be able to follow your heart and your vision with the
Yeah.
way you see things fit and the way business should be. That is one thing in partnership where you run into a lot of conflict. I think a lot of partnerships are that way, where you got to have a voting, and not everyone's always going to be on the same page. So sometimes the business struggles, and whoever might be right or have the better vision, sometimes it just puts a little toll on the business.
Yeah.
And whoever kind of tends to want to be the leader, or the domineer, if you will, in the partnership, thing, it's like anything. It's like if you have a team and things aren't really going your way, well, you have to sort of conform, right? And you might not agree, but you have to conform. And whether you win or lose, then that's on the team, that's on the coach. And so sometimes that happens in partnerships, and I definitely related a lot to sports, especially like hockey,
Yeah.
my background.
Mm.
Yeah, well, we won't dive into that, but you were definitely a fourth line dump and chase guy, from what I heard.
Well, fun fact, you guys played
Yeah.
well, you guys played hockey together, right?
No,
Yeah, he was a year after me, or so, I think after I
Oh,
left, you
really?
came, yeah, a year after I did. So yeah,
Nice.
real
yeah,
real
we
close.
missed each other, so that
Oh.
was my loss. Um,
Yeah,
I
you
want
would
to
have
jump back.
been. That would have been a beauty to have you on our, those last 2 years. You would have loved it.
I know. I missed my calling for you guys, but I want to step back. So, well, I find it interesting right now with what you're doing with Triumph is you noted that you're trying to essentially grow your company to establish legitimacy to the banks on the bank
Mhm.
side, right? But you have credibility. You've done this once, you've been through it, and you're still kind of trying to earn that trust, if you will. You mentioned that you had a couple of investors your first time around where you're much more green in the industry. How the heck do you approach investors to get behind you that early on? And kind of what was your tactic to get them to buy in?
Well, and how old were you?
I was 24, getting ready to turn 25 when we started my old company,
Nice.
and
So young.
yeah, so I was still in school. I was put a business plan together in my economics class, and I've been staying close to the scrap industry. And in 2008, the markets got to all-time highs, and people were making a lot of margin. People, and they were hiring, buying assets, and I kept getting a bunch of great job offers. And so the guys that sort of backed me wanted me to originally work for them. But I declined that offer because I had a funny feeling that, I have a real shot here at starting something of my own. If I could have somebody just to back me and allow me to try it and see what we could do,
Yeah.
that I had, I really believed in, a lot of success with my approach and my plan. So it actually ended up working out. These guys, instead of hiring me, they decided to, back me a line of credit. And unfortunately I had to take a minority position though, in order to get there. But, um, you know, whether
So
that
wait,
was the right, yeah,
you said that these guys had offered you a job.
they offered me
You
a job.
essentially came back to them and said, "Hey guys, I'm going to have to decline on the opportunity, but
Hmm.
here's my business pitch. Do you guys want to partake and be a partner with
Exactly.
me on my
Yes.
venture?"
Yes.
And
That
they were,
takes guts.
yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
you would think they'd be like, hey, screw off. Like, what are you talking about?
Like, who's this
right.
kid? Like,
Yeah.
we're here to teach you,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you
Yeah.
ultimately flip the
Actually,
script.
yeah.
Yeah, you only got a couple years experience. How could you be so qualified to be able to do this? And but they did. They were previous customers of mine. I think they knew I had the relationships with these steel mills, and I can get the market share and the orders. So I think they were willing to to gamble on that and give me a shot. And the nice thing about a brokerage business is it doesn't require a lot of overhead. I mean, you need a line of credit, yes, and you need a few bucks in your savings account, but it doesn't. There's a lot of ways to kind of work the channels and, back to back your business where, when you buy something and you get paid, you don't have to pay until you get paid to your customers. And so there's a lot of unique ways to do things. But having that line of credit was very beneficial in the beginning to really launch the business. I mean, the steel mills pay in 45 to 60 days. And to be competitive to buying scrap, you have to pay within 15, 30 days. Something just popped up on my computer. I'm going to change something here.
That's crazy. It's funny. We in South Florida, this is kind of related, but something that's kind of popular or was popular was screened in pools. And one of our houses, we had a ugly screened in pool, and people would literally come and like offer to pay you to take it down.
Right.
Like you didn't have to pay them because they wanted the metal, and
Oh yeah.
they would go and sell it. And we would always feel kind of bad. We were like, this is like one time I almost watched a man die because it like they're heavy. They're really heavy, and it like came down on him. And he yeah, they like sold it, but it's like they made a ton of money off that stuff. It's crazy.
What we call that. There's a customer of mine that's sort of come up with a slogan, but he calls that scrap money. So we call that scrap money. Get that scrap money, and yeah. But
Well, that was
yeah,
always how I envisioned it, right? Was, you'd see just kind of like unique scenarios like that. I didn't connect just almost like the commercial side of it, if you will.
Yeah.
yeah.
Just how much of it can be processed, how much of an opportunity there is. And like I said, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around the fact that you're calling yourself boutique based on the scale on what you're talking about compared to other industries. So that's a unique perspective, if you will. And something I appreciate about you, and it's funny, like I hear you talking all the way back from, and you also talk about Costco as though nobody knows what Costco is.
Yeah,
which is
I know.
hilarious.
Costco, like where they sell like giant applesauce and stuff.
Right.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah.
Costco
Okay, everybody
wholesale
knows that.
center, whatever. You've always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit and perspective to things. It seems like you see, hey, this is the traditional path, but I see a little bit of a different way to do it. And you've used that to your advantage throughout your career, to the fact where you ultimately were getting your education and used a capstone class and a final project to create a business plan to set you up to do your own thing, right? And I think all entrepreneurs are different in some capacity, where some are more traditional and see a bright idea and take advantage of it. But have you always felt as though growing up, once you started to focus on your future, you would be doing your own thing and betting on yourself? Or did it just kind of, as you grew an understanding of what you wanted to do, then realize, I don't want to work for the man, if you will, I want to do it by myself instead?
Yeah, I think I've always envisioned, since I was like 5 years old, being in business and doing things on my own. I love the leadership aspect of it. I love I love with how my mind works. I have to be able to like follow my mind and my method. So it's the weirdest thing. And, I think, hockey gave me that ability and that sort of independence and survival skills. with living, with, going to 4 different high schools, living in Canada, and the US, playing hockey, and, having to stick up for myself and, try to perform and put the puck in the net or drop the gloves and do what I need to do. And, as much as it evolves around your team, it also, evolves around the individual and what you're willing to put into it, the sacrifice you're willing to put into it. And I think us hockey players have a lot in common, with sort of those entrepreneurial, mindsets and, abilities. But ever since I was a young kid, I think I see my dad in sales. My dad was a great sales guy, and I see my dad kind of get tossed around. You make so much money for your company, and then when hard times hit, they let go of the highest paid guys, and things evolve. And I always saw that sort of frustrating my dad, because he was great. You know what I'm saying? And there, you can never understand, why does he have to go through this? And it was like a 3 to 7 year cycle with companies that you work for, and so I just kind of always told myself, it's like, if I'm going to do all that traveling and all that work, I'm going to do it for myself.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what I did. And I figured, I was always told the best time to do things is when you're young, before you're married, before you have children. Like, what do you got to lose? Go for it. Try it. Worst case, you fail and you go back home and live with mom and dad. But when I started my company, I lived with mom and dad. I paid off my college tuition within my first year of being in business. I was very frugal, stayed at home. It was, yeah, it wasn't the lifestyle, young, mid 20-year-old wants to live, but I did it, and I saved. So, and that'd be one thing I would always suggest to any sales guy or businessman, is to always save your money. Save.
Yeah.
Don't live beyond your means. Save your money,
Yeah.
because shit will happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For
It
sure.
Yeah, and
always
especially with the
does.
economy and the industry, like, you just never know, and depending on what industry you're in. So our favorite last question is, if not scrap metal, what? Knowing yourself, knowing your skill sets, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, what if that guy never came in Costco and said, "Come meet with me," what else do you think you would be doing?
Probably be having a car wash business by now. I've always loved clean cars, and I love the car. I always have. I've always been a passionate. I dated a
That
girl,
answer is
yeah,
hilarious.
that her father owned car washes, and I just loved car washes. I really did. Just nothing like a good, clean car.
How often do you get your car washed?
Every day, just about.
Every
I got
oh,
the
you
membership. Yeah, it's a membership.
you got
You pay the monthly thing and you go.
your car is probably really messy
It
with
is
all
right.
the, like
Oh,
with
it's
all like,
always that.
where you
Well, that's why you have to. I can't keep a clean pair of shoes or a clean car ever.
oh,
Okay,
that's
so
so
first of all, this has nothing to do with the business itself. It's just strictly because you enjoy car washes.
Right.
So it's the
well,
passion
he likes the
project for
hustle.
sure.
I love cash. I love cash-based businesses.
Okay, there you go.
Third on the list would probably be
Lemonade stand.
I love it.
and ice creams. Honestly, yeah.
He's like, I
I,
also love ice cream.
yeah. I thought I had this business plan for the Frosty Pelican.
Oh my gosh. Wait,
Yeah,
So
what?
that's essentially
with a
what you're
pelican
selling.
with a scarf around his neck.
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
Pelican.
I just grown up on the beach my whole life. I always liked pelicans, and it kind of reminds me of my past. And I love soft serve ice cream.
I'm pretty sure there's a brand called something like that now, but that's
Uh,
hilarious.
Yeah.
well,
Anyways,
we appreciate you, brother. I actually
Yeah.
had one more question on breaking the rules. That TV, did he ever end up having to bring it back and pay for it, or how did that deal end for you at Costco?
Actually, I don't think he ended up buying it. So in exchange, he hired me.
There you
So
yeah.
yeah, he
Wow.
hired me, and to this day, that man is still like a second dad to me. He's been very close, been supportive to me in my venture here in Triumph, yeah, no, I've got a lot to thank for him, because he did bring me into a business. Sometimes he jokes and feels bad that he brought me into this business, because it's a tough business. I mean, you got to be strong willed, and you can't be a glass half empty guy or gal in this business. You just can't. So, because there's always something happening, and whenever something good happens, it's like, look out, and when's the storm going to strike, right? And that's it. That's how we survive this business. We take the wins, we save, and we prepare, and that's the way this industry works.
Well, we'll end on that note. Again, thank you, buddy. I know you're a busy guy. You send me photos of trucks and everything going on with you, and you have 17 monitors behind you of things going on. So
Oh
I don't want
yeah.
to take any of your time. And again, thank you. Thank you
Nice.
for jumping on with us.
All right. Yeah,
Awesome.
my pleasure. Good catching up. Thanks.